It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Thursday, October 20th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is kind of sad. The streak is over, but guess it had to happen sometime.
It was inevitable.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, once again. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here with prospect expert Russ Cohen, who's on Twitter at Sportsology. That is going to come in handy later in the show. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow us on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. That's where you'll keep up with our episodes and Flyers news. You can also email the show at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. On today's show, we are going to recap the Flyers' first loss of the season last night to the Florida Panthers, 4-3. Plus, we are going to do our first prospect profile of the season with Adam Fantilli. Locked On Flyers is free and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you are listening. So subscribe. You'll get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Plus, we're over on YouTube if you want to see our smiling faces as we talk about the Flyers over there. We did pick up somebody off waivers, Lukas Sedlak. We are going to talk about that and the reasoning behind it after we talk about the game, because I think we're all fired up to get into that one first. And man, I did not have high hopes for this game with it being on the second half of the back-to-back. The win against Tampa just seemed too good to be true. Then I started getting hope when I heard that Aaron Ekblad was on LTIR, and I was like,
And
maybe.
Montour, that's two of their
Yeah.
best defensemen, yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, well, maybe the Flyers could take advantage of that. But man, I mean, the score definitely not reflective of this game. This was a rough one, Russ.
It was a rough one. My issue with this game is Torts gave Rocky Thompson like a pat on the back because they have 4 power play goals, but the amount of 2-on-1s that the power play is giving up should not get a pat on the back. And right now I look at the team and I'm like, they're still in extended preseason because of what happened with the way Torts ran preseason. Because the power play, even though it may score once in a while because it does have some talent, it's a mess. There's no structure. It's a mess. Provorov did a better job of shooting at the point than D'Angelo because D'Angelo's trying to get
Mhm.
too fancy. Torts recognized that. There's a lot of things, little things that are going wrong on that. And it's mainly there's only a couple of young players left on this roster, like young in the fact that, what you would call a rookie. So these are veterans doing it mainly.
Yeah, you mentioned the odd man rushes going the other way on the power play, and the Flyers allowed 7 scoring chances, 5 of them high danger while they were on the power play, which is not great if you're trying to
No.
score on the man advantage. I think, your point about Tony D'Angelo is a good one. He's still playing really tentatively at the point,
Yes.
I think, and it seems like they're suffering from something that they have done in the past on the Flyers, which is staying too far to the outside. They're
Hmm.
not squeezing the other team defensively, and they're also at the same time not moving the puck fast enough to create the lanes. So they're just kind of passing around the way outside edges of the defensive zone. And D'Angelo can't find the shot because they're not moving fast enough to create the lane.
And they need to practice when they're like 6-on-4 too. That was embarrassing. They had 2 shots on goal until
Mhm.
ended up scoring a goal with like 2 seconds to go. But the 6-on-4, they didn't do anything. It was
Mm-mm.
awful.
Yeah, and again, that is not moving the puck fast enough, not having set plays that they've practiced that they can do in their sleep so that they can create those lanes. They absolutely should have had more shots on that 6-on-4. And so while I think they did have a lot of the resiliency they've had so far this season in terms of tenacity and effort, the structure and the execution just wasn't there for
Right.
most of the game.
And I'll tell you something that, Kevin Allen, who I hold in high regard, said on another show about Torts, and that basically was guys in the first 10 games are going to try and over torts it. They're going to do everything they can defensively. They're going to try and do everything they can to get playing time, which is something I brought up, I think, 2, 3 shows ago. He echoed that.
Mhm.
And he said after 10 games, it starts to slide back if you don't have that talent. And I think that's what we're going to see. I think, they're going to be pesky and resilient, but you can't fall behind 2-0 every game. You can't do there's certain things you can't do here that it doesn't matter who your coach is, you're not going to overcome. And so this is, these are big things that need to be fixed. And right now, the 3-1 record's really not reflective of things that are going wrong.
I think so as well, and, I wanna have as much fun as possible with this team, and I think the
Yeah,
team
sure.
is creating some really good moments
Hmm.
for us. It's just very clear that there are some big things still wrong there, and so it's like trying to balance that out. This is what we talked about, right before the season started. It's like, let's try and have a glass half full approach to this season, and so I think that there were those moments. I do think that Konechny shot was beautiful at the
Hmm.
end, and the way that Bobrovsky just got schooled in terms of being out of place on that. And
Yeah.
I do wanna give guys credit when they do good stuff like that. I think the other thing for me is that again, when we did our preview of this back to back, we talked about trying to slow down these faster teams and
Yeah.
force them into an east-west game as opposed to a north-south game. Flyers did absolutely none of that versus Florida. Florida was just it was a track race the whole time.
Yeah. And whatever, like I said, whatever toughness the Flyers have meant nothing against Florida. It really didn't, because they have the same toughness and they have guys who are more skilled with that same toughness. And
Mhm.
so, I just feel like they need to sort of, and this is Torts too. He is going to have to conform somewhat to what the talent is on the ice. Uh, Mike Yo definitely suffered from some of that, and Torts will fight it longer because he's more stubborn. But again, it could be a long season if you're playing, these guys tremendous minutes, expecting this unbelievable effort every single minute of every single game. Because, like Anson Carter said, you can't do it for 82 games. And these
No.
are, and then we, and I recognize that.
Yeah, I think that that's exactly what's happening here, and I think that it's really difficult because again, the score is 4-3. JVR, does something really good that he's
Hmm.
supposed to do. I mean, that's why they have him on this team is to
Yeah.
get goals like that, and so you wanna give them as much credit as possible, but I think that it's not sustainable, and I think there's a lot going on there. One thing
And
I
Felix
do
Sandstrom deserved better because he really played a great game. And, he was hung out to dry in the third period, basically.
Yeah, he was. I think he wants that 4th goal back. I think
But it
that
went
was
off
the
D'Angelo's stick, and when it went off his stick, it was on edge. Like, that puck was wobbling all over the place, but maybe he wants it back, but still, that was another, like, sort of like, "Oh, I'll stick in my stick there by D'Angelo," and he deflects it on, in the net. It's like he would have been better off if he just let Mahora just actually shoot it. Push him to the
yeah,
outside, but let him shoot it, because
yeah.
Sandstrom was stopping everything.
Yeah, and I think that, I don't remember who it was who said it on the broadcast. It might have been Biz, but I don't know, off the top of my head. But in terms of, the goaltending that the Flyers are getting right now, that is something that is also probably
It was
unsustainable.
Tocchet.
Oh, it
Talk
was Tocchet. Okay, yeah, it
Yeah,
just
he
wasn't.
said you can't keep up like a 945 save
Yeah,
percentage all year, and he's right.
yeah, I think that was spot on, and I think that when you're depending on goaltending to cover for the mistakes that you're making, and you don't fix those mistakes, the goaltending solution is going to run out eventually.
Yeah, and I get why the broadcast was confused, because even I'm a little confused that they're not trying to play more defensive hockey. They're actually over activating the blue liners. I mean, look, Nick Seeler gets a goal, nice goal, Nick, but there were so many other things he did wrong in this game that, you know, it's hard to say that that goal meant anything after that. But
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of guys that had really good moments, but also really weak moments, and
yeah,
we are going to talk about those coming up next. But first, we're going to hear about our friends at Bet Online.
BetOnline.net's your number one source for all your football betting needs this season. Find all of the latest player developments, team matchups, news and podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you could find. As always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including the MLB playoffs, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet online, where the game starts.
The NHL season is in full swing, and so is Locked On's Game to Game NHL. You get every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NHL with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. So follow Game to Game on the Locked On NHL channel. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Russ, we were just talking about Nick Seeler, and I think that was a question that I came out of this game with is, did Nick Seeler have a good game?
I think in the end, no.
Yeah, I think that's where it comes out for me as well. Maybe the first half of his game was good. He did get that
hmm
goal. He was blocking shots. I think he was really battling on the boards and getting involved offensively, like you were just talking about. But man, was he out of position a lot,
Yeah,
especially in the second half of that game.
yeah, and being out of position, that's a big part of the position. Like even when Anson Carter said, "Wow, look at Nick Seeler turning on the Jets with like no regard," like just and that
Yes, no regard. That's the
and
problem.
the hair on the back of my neck stood up, because it's like he has to have regard, because he has to know he's gonna have a hard time getting back the other way. But,
Mhm.
that's the whole thing. It's like they've got, for whatever reason, early in this season, all the defensemen have basically the green light to just, to go when they feel like they need to go. But the problem is, as we saw highlighted with D'Angelo when Provorov had to get off the ice, that he and Braun weren't really sure what to do. You want to blame it on Braun, fine. You want to blame it on D'Angelo, fine. But at the end of the day, D'Angelo was so deep on that play. I think even if he saw the change, he couldn't have done anything about it. So again, unless
Right, and you
D'Angelo,
gotta have your head on a swivel when you're
you
playing
do,
D,
and he really
and for
didn't.
him to not see what was going on, that's his job.
Yeah. So these are big things that have to be worked on with D'Angelo. It doesn't seem like Torts has even worked with D'Angelo for a minute on his defense. Not for a minute.
Yeah, you have to wonder what's going on there in terms of practice and what they're working on defensively. Now, I will say, there's a little bit of allowance defensively overall with the injury to
Sure.
Ristolainen because the pairs are different. Not that top pair
Not the
though.
top pair. That's set
Right.
in stone, right?
So I think that, maybe they're focusing more of their energy on the two bottom pairs because they're different than they would have expected. But uh, ultimately, I think the structure has to be there for everybody. And I think that, um, yeah, they really do have to work on a lot of things with positioning and with responsibilities and with communication on the blue line.
Yeah, to me it's massive. It's like it's one of these things where Yes, I understand D'Angelo is getting you points in the early going here, but some of the plays that he's giving up when you start playing these better teams and he's on your top pair, those points are going to ring hollow.
Yeah. On the flip side of things, we talked a little bit about Travis Konechny in the first segment, but he
Mhm.
did have another really solid game.
He
I
did.
thought he was doing all the right things. I felt like he was owed that goal at the end, to be
Sure.
honest.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, he worked hard. In the early going here, he has really, um, redone his game. He may not want to admit it himself, but he redid his game, and we
Mhm.
like what he did. Now, on the broadcast, I may bristle with when they asked Jonesy if he thinks he could be a 30-goal scorer. That's been the whole thing this whole time with Konechny. Can he score 30? And I'm still not. He hasn't convinced me he could do that yet. But he's more on his way to scoring 30 than not scoring 30, and that's a positive.
Yeah, I think so too. I do, I also think that, again, not 100% there yet, but I think Kevin Hayes played a little better
Yeah,
in
he
this
played a
one.
little better. I give you
Yeah.
that. Where this team is just getting destroyed, he's on faceoffs. Now, they said an interesting thing on the broadcast, and this is why I kind of like TNT better than ESPN because TNT will broach other subjects that, like, I think ESPN just doesn't even want to go there. And they were debating sort of whether, a faceoff is a singular stat or a team stat. And I think it's both. And it's both because, like they said, about the 50-50s and how your team reacts. And if you look at the faceoff percentages, they were brutal. And they
Mhm.
weren't good against Tampa either. And so, this
No,
is
we talked
something,
about that yesterday.
yeah. So this is something where, this is also a trend. It'll get better with when Couturier's back and we know he's gonna start skating Friday. So that's something. But it's not going to cure the whole team right away. And Kevin Hayes is a part of that, and they're all a part of that. So again, this is more teaching. So if Torts wants to put all this on the assistants, that's fine. But there's a lot of teaching things here that aren't going right.
Yeah, as we watch Claude Giroux teach everybody else on the Ottawa Senators how to do face-offs
Yeah.
and succeeding there on that front, as he always does. It hurts a little bit, I gotta say. But I think another guy that stood out to me in terms of, again, just doing the little things right was Scott Lawton. I think, he is my sort of fourth star of the game here in that I feel like, again, he's just doing the little things, doing the right things away from the puck. And, while he didn't score in this one, I think he's playing consistently so far.
Yeah. And the only thing that I worry about here is Scott Lawton will do anything for anybody. He'll go through the wall. He will do anything the coach wants to win. And so, this is something that, Torts has plugged into. And as a result, he's getting this unbelievable effort and result out of Lawton. But now Lawton's blocking way more shots. He's getting a little more banged up every game. I worry about that a little bit. Because even
Yeah,
they
I
brought
could
it up
see
on the
that.
broadcast. Why is he blocking that shot? Like, why does he feel like he has to block that shot? That shot he didn't have to block. And it's true. There is a point, and I understand Wayne Gretzky talks about this too. When you're one of the better players on the team, yes, you are expected to play some defense. And yes, if it's late in the game, block a shot. But you don't want to potentially get hurt in the middle or early of a game because you're blocking a shot. So there is a time to do it and a time not to do it.
All right, moving on to our new player, Lukas Sedlak, who was picked up off of waivers from the Colorado Avalanche. The Avalanche had been trying to do some shuffling on their fourth line, and as a result, put Sedlak on waivers to try and send him down to Colorado. Flyers said, "Oh, we'll take him." Uh, I think, of course, my first thought was, what is the John Tortorella connection here? And sure enough, he was drafted by Columbus and played for the Blue Jackets while Torts was the coach there. So,
Yeah.
little predictable.
Very predictable. Again, which young player is this guy going to take playing time away from. That's what I worry about.
Mhm.
And, and that's the whole thing. I think after 20 games into the season, with the exception of just running guys up and down for a few games here and a few games there, I kind of want to assess, which of the younger players are really getting a chance here, because that's what I think Sedlak, and he does play center. So you do have to worry about that aspect too, if he is going to take over that fourth line center spot now.
Tortorella expressed some concern about the play of Tanner Lazinski, who has been a fourth line center, but also played on the wing a little bit as well. And that just basically hinting in the same way with Hayden Hodgson and the same way with Ollie Lixel. Like now we're getting the pattern here.
Yeah, he has no patience for him. And honestly,
Yeah.
I thought Lisinski was
I
pretty good in the third period. I
yeah.
thought he did some good things. I did notice him. So I just think now this is ringing a little hollow with me with Torts saying this, because it's just an easy way to send these guys down.
Yeah, I don't believe what he's saying with this stuff because I have noticed these guys and they also have not gotten a ton of minutes in a lot of cases, especially with Hodgson and Lixel. I talked about 2 as a coincidence, 3 as a pattern on
Yeah,
yesterday's show. Now we've got our pattern.
yeah.
And I don't like it. I don't like it at all because we've been talking about this season being really important in terms of data collection and knowing what exactly we have with these young guys so we know who to keep around, who to try and trade, and all of that stuff. And I think that this is not the right approach to get that done. And I will say a lot of good things about John Tortorella and what he's doing so far. And
hmm
this is the thing about him that bothers me the most.
Yeah, I mean, Lisinski in 4 games has 2 points. He's not a minus. He has no penalty minutes. Like, what's he doing wrong?
Couldn't tell you, Russ. I could not tell
Like,
you.
that's way more production. If you cost that out through a season, that's more production than Patrick Brown gave last year.
I don't know, man. I mean, this is nothing against Sedlak. He could turn out to be useful as a fourth liner, but he can't do anything besides that. But I just I just don't see the point, honestly. I just don't.
No, I don't either. And so this is one of those situations where, we're gonna mash our teeth a little bit on it, because it's like, again, I get it. Like right now, Torts is sort of following the game plan that Mike Babcock did first year with the Leafs. The only difference is they said this is gonna be painful. And Torts isn't saying that. Fletcher is saying the opposite, that they're going to be fun to watch and everything else. That's fine, but they're still doing similar things. These veteran coaches uh, who play similar styles, and right now Torts is doing the same thing. He's bringing as many of his guys in that he is comfortable with, so it's one less thing he feels like he needs to worry about.
Well, we are going to talk about the future coming up next with our very first 2023 draft prospect profile of Adam Fantilli. Russ, I'm excited to talk about Adam Fantilli for many reasons. One, I love that we're going to do an early look at him in this season because we'll
hmm
be able to go back later and revisit this guy because he is definitely a top 5 pick in the draft. No question. He could go probably to
hmm
maybe 3. I think 4 is probably the lowest he'll go if
Yeah,
he kind of stays on the track that he is. He only just turned 18, so
which is
he's
crazy.
I know. It's absolute madness because he's already underway in his first year at Michigan, where he's got a goal and 7 assists in 4 games so far. And, before that, he was with the Chicago Steel in the USHL. Last year, 74 points in 54 games, which was split pretty evenly, I think, between goals and assists, but also a lot of penalty minutes with 93. So,
Yeah, he's a big, strong kid. He's always played up in age. I saw him, for the last 2 years in the USHL and was super impressed. And he's just used to doing this. Like when I interviewed him, he was talking to me from Yost Arena, and he was just like, "Yeah, I'm going to be playing here next week." He wasn't even phased. Like he wasn't even like there was no pressure in his voice. Like, "Oh, I'm worried about what might happen here." No, he's a super prepared kid, up mentally and on the ice. So The mental part is what really impressed me, maybe as much since, Crosby and like a McKinnon, in the sense that, and even those guys didn't speak this way. And he was basically like, listen, I look how goals are scored. I'm looking in the NHL and I'm looking on websites and I'm looking where they're scored from, how they're scored from, and I'm trying to do the same thing and I'm trying to be just as successful. And that's a lot, for a guy to be doing that over the summer. Like that's his extra work, his little hobby, to get himself better. Like that's impressive. So again, he worked out tremendously offensively too. On and off the ice, he's got a wrist shot that he feels could get better, and that's already really good. His playmaking's really good. He could play center or wing. He should be a center um, in the NHL. He looks like a center to me. Uh, Again, he's used to playing with good teams and good players, and none of that phases him. He knew he was going to play against older, stronger players, and he's just like, yeah, I'm ready for it. Like I'm up to the challenge. The good thing for him is that he's rooming with his brother. He has an older brother there, and so that's
Right.
good. That could help him feel grounded. But beyond that, there's nothing that I worry about with this kid, and he knows it's his draft year, and he's going to nail it.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to talk about is, you look at some of his stats, like how he's starting out at Michigan.
Mhm,
You look at his stats from U18s
mhm.
on Team Canada, where he had a goal and 5 assists in 4 games. And so it seems like from some of his stats that he's more of a playmaker than a shooter. Do you think that's kind of where he'll go in the NHL?
I think that's true, but I do think his shot's developing. I think that's why he knows he's a playmaker, but he also knows that um, he could do better with his shooting, and I think that's where he's aiming for. As an example, with those U18s, he played with Connor Bedard, the guy who's going to go ahead of him in the draft, and he was playmaking for him. And so, I mean, and
Lucky
that,
kid.
yeah, I mean, but again, you have to be pretty damn good to be able to play make with Bedard because he's doing things that really not a lot of players can do. And if you weren't syncing with him on a line, they'd put somebody else. So, you think about it at his age doing all of that, and it's not like he's a flash in the pan because he's been doing it for years. He's been doing this for like 3 or 4 years, this is exact same way, and he can play with some aggression, and he will be physical, so that's why he's not worried about, the college path, but he said something very smart to me. He felt like the college path was right for him because otherwise what would happen is he'd be in the, OHL for, like, 4 years, because he figured, "Listen, there's very little chance of me making it in the NHL at the age of 18. So that's unrealistic. So instead, he went to the USHL for a couple of years and he's going to go and he'll play at least the 1 year in college. I suspect because he's on the young end of things, he'll play two. And then, and then he'll probably go out. And again, he gets to work out 3 days a week and he's a tireless, he works very hard and he does work on still getting stronger, even though he's pretty strong already. Just imagine when this guy comes out, what he's going to be like. Jonathan Taves went to college. What was he like when he came out? It really does work sometimes for players.
Yeah, I think that's a really good path for him, and, he's not small, like you said. I mean,
Oh,
he's 6'2", but he's also, like, a lot of kids that young would still be, like, 165 pounds or something, but he's got,
yeah.
like, an additional 20 pounds on him already, and so he just has to figure out how to shape that and have it work to his advantage.
Yeah, and he's not just knocking pucks in because he's big either. Like he acknowledged he's bigger than a lot of guys when he was playing for, first starting out maybe in the USHL. But even the USHL has some older players too. And so as that went on, he kind of moved up. And so it didn't matter. Like he was still going to be up for that challenge. And right now, as a true freshman in a very hard division in college hockey, he's succeeding.
Yeah, I love watching him play. Looking forward to it all season long, and we are gonna check in on him again as we get closer to the Frozen Four, as I'm sure he'll be part of that tournament. because Michigan's looking pretty good this year. But yeah, so the march toward next year's draft begins, and we'll keep bringing you more prospects and see where the Flyers end up after the rest of this season goes, and who we might be able to take a shot at. But wrapping things up with our Flyers fun thing, there was an absolute deluge of timed posts from hockey teams about their reverse retro jerseys yesterday. Flyers were no different. So we got a teaser of that, which should be revealed at some point today. Although I think we know it's like a reverse of the black jerseys. So it'll be white with the black on the sleeves, with the orange piping. So look for that. But
So what day of the week are they going to wear that? Or is it just going to be reverse retro games?
I think teams have a little flexibility in terms
I
of when
think
they
so
can
too.
assign it. So I'm not sure exactly, but they may announce it when the jersey reveal happens.
Right. So the Flyers only wear black on Saturday, so it's not going to be on Saturday. So they'll have to figure out which other day or days they're going to do it.
Yep. All right, that will do it for today's show. We will be back again tomorrow. We are going to preview the weekend matchups against the Preds and Sharks. And as a reminder, we always want to hear from you. Send in your mailbag questions via Twitter at LockedOnFlyers, or you can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
You made us your first listen today. Now make your second listen to Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Steele Roden and Flip Livingstone bring you the fantasy edge and keep you ahead of the competition with daily updates of news, analysis, and advice Monday through Friday. It's available on YouTube, Odyssey, wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.